Awesome. All right, man. Well, we got a couple more minutes. I see people joining us. I see an old name I hadn't seen in one. Rod Noonan. What's up, Rod? Get my chat box going here. Awesome. Got folks joining.
I'll be right back.
All right, Ralph. Ralph's going to leave me high and dry for a little while. Y'all throw in the chat box where you're joining us from, too.
I don't know how to get that.
Okay. Is the chat and make sure chat's working. So there's a chat section and a Q&A section also. So
I go in the chat probably.
Yeah, there's a chat section and there's a Q&A. So we're gonna hit all the Q&As at the end, but
here you go.
I like it. Awesome. Stacy, there's Stacy in Fort Worth. What's up, Juan?
I like it.
Hazlet in the house.
Haslett. Wow. Alito. We like
What's up? How are you, Kelly? Lieber in there. Hey, Megan.
All right, let's get this show going, baby.
Let's get the show going. We're right up, straight up 1 o'clock. So, hey, everybody, welcome. And thanks for being here with us. Whether you're sitting at your desk or tuning in from the car or catching this on the replay, we're glad you made the time. And if you're looking to create more consistency, more structure, and ultimately better results in your business, then guess what? You're in the right place. I'm Chance Dorsey. I'm the managing director at Sales Solve Everything, and I've been in the new home sales world for about 25 years now. And I've seen just about every kind of market that you can imagine. And I can tell you firsthand, the folks who win are the ones who plan their work and actually work their plan. And that is exactly what today is about. I have the privilege of working with an amazing team at Sales Solve Everything. And one of those people is the guy you're going to hear from today, Ralph Williams. And I've been with Sales Solve Everything now for about 4 years. And one of the biggest reasons I came on board with was because of what Ralph teaches. So much of it lined up with what I had already believed and lived for years. And at the same time, he brought a fresh perspective and new tools that made me even better. Even now, after all these years in the industry, I still walk away from every conversation picking up something new. Ralph just has a way of making complex stuff really simple and, more importantly, actionable. And today's topic, 851, is a great example of that. Now, if you're wondering, okay, Chance, what exactly is 851? Well, don't worry, we'll break it down. But in short, it's a system. It's a rhythm, a way to take all of the energy and activity that you're already putting out each week and give it direction. So instead of spinning your wheels, you're making actual progress. So no fluff, no gimmicks, just real structure that helps you show up more consistently and close more deals. And hey, we know your time's valuable, so we'll keep things moving, but we also want this to be interactive. So if something sparks a question along the way, drop it in the Q&A section. There's a Q&A section and there's a chat section. So make sure you put it in the Q&A section because we're watching it and we'll take time for answering those questions at the end to make sure you walk away with what you need. All right, fair enough. All right, so that's enough from me. Let's get into it, Ralph. Ralph, take it away, my friend.
Wow, that's pretty good introduction, man.
You like that?
Like it.
Yeah, man, I really thought that one out.
I like when you say, like, take complicated things and make things simple. You're just making me look good because I just keep things simple. I'm not that complicated.
Well, you got to make the boss. Yeah, well, that's the way we all should be. Keep it simple, stupid, right?
Right. Well, I like it. And hey, I want to thank everybody on here for joining us today because look, it takes the first step of wanting to learn, wanting to get better at what you do, maybe trying new things, adding new structure, trying new systems. And the first step for all of us, is learning continuously. I just started a master course on stuff that was like 40 years old with like Wayne Dyer and Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar, just to like hear some of those thoughts, because I think so many times I look back and go, God, I really learned a lot from those people, and those systems, those things still apply in this world today. So without further ado, I want to share my screen, and I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, obviously. Let's see, is it sharing now? And then I'll share it right there. All right, good. I think you all see it. But it's a system. And before I start, like I want the premise to be like, there's people on here right now that are selling one home a week every week. There's people that are on here that are not selling one a week that would like to. And then there's people that are probably selling more than one a week, or they want to sell more than one a week, which is what I profess is what we should all shoot for at minimum with the 851 system. So this is a system that came from me. This is not where I heard it from anybody else. That's me, of course, but I learned this system years ago. So I've been in this business since the day I turned 19 years old. But I really started and I always had the mentality from a young age of doing as much as possible. But there was some point where I couldn't figure out what as much as possible meant. So I'm going to talk to you as a sales professional selling new homes just like you, and how this system really came to be. I obsessed about figuring out exactly how to get a sale every single week. Like, I tracked all my details. I made sure that once I figured out the formula, I just kept doing it over and over again. And then when I became a sales manager, a sales leader, then I actually taught it to my sales teams, and I tracked it religiously. This is a formula that truly works. I've been in lots of places where they give you philosophy. This is kind of the blocking and tackling of things that you need to do every single week in order to be successful, at least the way I did it. Now, since then, as a coach, as a sales consulting team, as a training team, we have teams all across the country that have got onto the system, and we get to see their sales reports. And so the numbers always work out to the same. Markets change, so they fluctuate a little bit with market conditions, but in a normal market, this is what really works. So the question I always ask every team, every salesperson I work with is, what if I could show you a formula that would allow you to predict your sales every single week? And I think that's pretty interesting, Chance, because I think if I knew that, I would work it, right? So to me, is if you knew the formula, would you actually use it? Number one, which, it's kind of like when you say, I'm going to start working out, or I'm going to be on a diet. Certain things work, but you have to use it, and you have to commit yourself to it, right? It's kind of the syndrome of, you got to make something a habit, something that you do until it takes hold
Yeah, you
for
start
it to
bringing
really
up the
work.
gym, man. You start bringing up the gym. Now you're speaking my language, right? Because
Well,
that's one that I struggle with.
that's the one I struggle with too. And so, but that's why it's so relatable to a lot of people is, look, we all like to eat, and but we don't want to exercise for the most part until you start getting into it. So, I look at it as committing yourself to doing something and sticking with it long enough to actually make it work. And that's when you make something work, then you actually know it's true for yourself. Like, I can tell you guys everything, and you guys, oh, I don't know if it works for me, and I don't know if it's true. But as soon as you work the system and you do it long enough and you stick with it and it works, then it becomes yours, Chance. And so to me, the system I've taught has helped so many people improve their life, their families, others. That's why I continually want to share this simple formula. So to kind of give this guy props, this is a guy named Valente Martinez. He's out of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and he was a salesperson when I was a sales leader, just starting that journey that I was trying to recruit. And I couldn't get him on my team. He was, he was doing 2 or 3 sales a month. He was good. He had lots of energy. It was just somebody that, that passion like kind of comes through. And I tried to recruit him. He wouldn't come for a few months, and I finally got him with, hey, Valente, what if I can show you, how to make more sales? Right now you're making 2 or 3. What if I can show you how to a system that can get you a sale every single week, no matter what. And he's like, if you can do that, then I'll come aboard. So that's what I made the promise to Valente. And so we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But to tell you this, well, let's talk this, Chance. Guess how many sales when Valente came over using my system, how many sales he had in that first month? What do you think?
Using your system, how many do you have in the first month?
Yeah.
Man, I'm shooting in the dark. I'm gonna say he had, because he's 851, right? I'm thinking you were talking one sale a week. So did he have four?
Yeah, no, he didn't have four.
Oh,
In fact, he didn't have six. He didn't have two. He had zero.
zero.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay. All
that's
right.
kind of, that's kind of where you say hey, are you committed to it? You look, Valente just made the change. He came over. And so, as a coach, as a leader, but as a salesperson, you got to say, well, okay, maybe it didn't work and it didn't work yet, right? Well,
Yeah.
things can change, right? When you keep doing things the right way. So can you guess how many sales Valente had in that second month?
Now I'm nervous about this. Let's see. I'm gonna say that Valente had some stick-to-itiveness to it,
He
right?
did
So he
have the stick
stayed
to
with it.
itiveness.
Okay, he stayed with it. So now I'm gonna split the difference. I said four a while ago. You said zero. I'm gonna go two. How
All
about
right. Well,
two?
he did everything I said to do, Chance. And the sad part is he got zero again. Okay,
Another
so
goose egg. Oh
another
wow.
goose
So
egg. Now,
this is a
if you're on
mindset
this
project.
call and you've been in this business for a while, you've had a goose egg. Most of us had a goose egg, maybe
Oh
two. You
yeah.
get in a little slump, or there's different reasons. But you know what? That's when I knew Valente. I could tell, from a salesperson's perspective, that he was probably saying, "Oh crap, why did I make that move? I came over, I was making sales, now I'm not making sales. Is this really work? Does this really work?" And
Yeah.
and as the sales coach, as the sales leader, I knew it worked for me, and I knew it started working for some of my other salespeople that were working on it. But I was like, maybe it's not. It was me. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was, But look, I had to be strong enough to say, hey, keep doing all the right things. Your behavior will drive the results. And so, guess how many in month three, Chance?
I'm hoping he saw some success in month three. So I'm gonna go back to what I did a while ago. I'm gonna say he did. Well, hold on. I'm hoping he saw success. I'm gonna go with four.
Okay, you're funny. He actually got six that month, and for the
Okay.
rest of the year, I don't think he had a month less than six. He was the number one salesperson out of 100 salespeople that I had on my team. He killed it, and just so you know that through thick and thin, even when people in a hard market, in 2008, 9, when all that was going on, and as a company, I had 100 salespeople. We had like 3 net sales all of a sudden in a quarter. Well, Valente probably had 15 of those sales, and the other ones were the negatives he was making up for. So that Valente, he still is selling at about 100 homes a year pace. So he doesn't expect to get 2 sales, one sale a week. He expects 2. So let's get right to it, and I'll talk about the formula. So here I'm going to open the vault and give you all the secret sauce. So the secret formula is 851. That's why we call the program Fahrenheit 851. Set your cells on fire. It means 8 appointments, 5 of them show up, and 1 sale. And what are some of the things that people probably are thinking right now? Maybe you can put it in your Q&A or in the chat box. But when I say that, I think it scares some people right now, Chance. Is anybody commenting? Do they think it's realistic? This is where, as a salesperson, sometimes you go, crud, how do I get 8 appointments? Do you see any of that on the feedback or on the chat?
I
I
agree.
think, are you there? I don't know if you're
Not seeing anything yet.
okay. Well, I don't know if
Did
you're
I lose you,
frozen.
Ralph?
Yeah, you were a little frozen. Can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
All right. Well, a lot of people get confused on what this actually means. So I'm gonna break it down, and go to the next of how we break this down. So the 8 appointments chances is it's really Okay, here we go. Why did it do? It's really not 8 separate people. So think about like, and I don't mean traffic either. So let's think 8 separate people of appointments. That wouldn't really equate into success. So what I really mean, Chance, when you have 8 appointments in a week, is kind of what the screen is showing is it's probably 2 or 3 families moving through that sales process, right? So let's say you have 3 different people. Can you get them to move forward and have a couple appointments in a week? That's really what I'm talking about. And that to me, I believe most of the time is very realistic in our world. To think that we would have 8 separate appointments and each of them you meet with once, that's not really a formula for success right now, because it's not too often that we convert on the first visit for somebody, the first appointment. So
So
I want you,
really, so really the 8 is 3 prospects is what I see there. Is that what
that's
you're saying?
yeah, that's really what I'm saying. It's 2 to 3 families, 2 to 3 prospects that are actually going through the process. And
Gotcha.
that,
Okay.
after all these years, I know is achievable. Is it hard sometimes in some markets, in some areas? Yes. Can it be done? Absolutely. So I wouldn't put a system on somebody that I didn't think worked, tried and true. I want them to be successful. So here's kind of a breakdown of those 8. It usually represents 2 or 3 families going through that buying process. It's and think about it this way: when you increase the number of appointments, your chances of success increase as well. So it's kind of like it's a no-brainer. So when I talked about I obsessed at looking at things that made me successful or measuring different things, I knew that if I had 8 appointments in a week, that I was going to get so many that would show and so many would sell. Well, I knew if I got 10 or 11 or 12 appointments in a week, maybe it was 4 families going through or 3 families going through, I was going to have a lot of success that week. And it really became like a measurement of what I was shooting for every week. I had financial goals, I had appointment goals, I had sales goals. But my most important goal every time was, how do I get to my 8 appointments? Because if I got to that lucky number, for me, it would get me a sale. So the other thing is, schedule these appointments strategically, these 2 to 3 families with slight overlap to create natural, believable urgency. I think when we're in a market, if we think about COVID, kind of COVID created that natural, perfect storm of natural, believable urgency, where if basically somebody said the house was available, if you don't take it, they knew somebody was behind you. So that created kind of a real sense of urgency at that point, but it just fed on each other. In a normal market or in a tougher market, urgency always isn't created, right? You might not have the numbers. So by overlapping appointments for clients, like, I think the thought process for some of my salespeople at the beginning was, well, I want to make sure I have enough time that I spend with each of these prospects. And so I'm going to schedule one at 10 a.m. in the morning. It's probably going to last me 2 hours. Then I'll schedule another one at like 2. And that might be the only 2 appointments, but nobody would ever see each other. So there's not that natural, believable urgency that occurs when you overlap appointments, if that makes sense. And then I thought, every time I had a big week where I had 8 appointments, 9, 10, it actually was a gauge and strength and depth of my sales pipeline. So I knew that I had people working. And if I converted one, I would still have 2 or 3 families that I'm still moving through, and I just needed to put more people in the hopper. The other thing was, and this is really key. So there's different talking points where I want people to either write things down or really think about them or put them, like make it a memory point. And the 8 represents 8 legitimate time, date, which a lot of people have. But what they forget is purpose of the appointments in one week. So time, date, and purpose is what I count as a real appointment. You got to think about it like you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a dentist. When you go into a dentist appointment, Chance, my guess is a date, a time, and you know why you're going, right?
For sure. Absolutely. Yep.
You know why you're going. So that's kind of the same thing. Is we have to actually have the same mentality. Is you have to know what the purpose of the appointment is, but your clients have to know the purpose of appointment. And that purpose might be to find a one-of-a-kind home or find a one-of-a-kind home site. Like, to do that stuff is the purpose of the appointment. And the other thing is, when you think about our formula, it's week specific. So it doesn't have the same effect. So when I say 851, that's one week. I don't think okay, hey, we don't get that many. So if we had 8 appointments in a month, that's going to be the same as 8 appointments in a week. The compression isn't there. So 8 appointments in a month does not have the same effect. This is a week specific formula. And also, B-backs don't count. So, when you have a time, date, and purpose, those are people that have a purpose of their appointment. When you have a B-back, which I'm not saying is bad, that's a good thing because they've already been there and they like you enough to come back. But to me, I never accounted that in my appointment total. It didn't seem to matter as much as far as if they just came back on their own. That was good. It was gravy, and I'd probably get a sale, but it wasn't part of my formula. So B-backs don't count. This number does not represent the quantity, just like we talked about, of separate prospects. It really is the quality of a couple, two or three that you're working through the process. And always schedule. Hey, Chance, my question to you is, and for most people out there, and think of why we're doing this. We're sharing this with you right now because the purpose is to give you guys a tool to manage yourself, to manage your results, versus somebody putting it on you, right? You're here on your own. Nobody's told you to be here. So I want to think about this. I always knew that if I came in early, let's say we opened the office at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, I always knew, and what I always did was had my best appointment for the weekend scheduled at 9 a.m.
At
Now,
9.
yeah. So I'd go in an hour early. Now, here was my mentality. My mentality was most of the time my traffic, the bulk of my traffic came in on the weekends. And so, my goal was to say, hey, to my prospect, I'm booked during the day. Now, I would maybe have one or two appointments, but on the weekends, I tried to use that time to capture the people that walked in the door, not necessarily to have appointments in the middle of the day where people might come in and I'd get disrupted. So my whole purpose was, hey, I'm going to come in early. I'm booked today. Now, what if when I say, hey, I'm booked today, but you know what? I know how important it is to you, and we're right there looking at your homes, and we're really close. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna come in early at 9 o'clock to make sure we have the time spent together. What does that say to you?
I wouldn't miss that appointment, especially with my personality type, because I'd be like, I don't want to waste this guy's time. I'm going to feel obligated to be there.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do is say, hey, we're going to do something for you, which creates that obligation. And we're going to talk more about the other ingredients besides the appointments, shows, and sales, but other ingredients like obligation and urgency. Now, the next appointment, my next best appointment, I would have overlap. I knew I always could get pretty much everything I needed to be done in an appointment. If I didn't dilly-dally around, I can do it in about 90 minutes. So what I would do is, let's say my best appointment came in at 9 and I'm just wrapping up and I know my appointment's coming in at 10:30 and I'm trying to get that deal over the goal line. And then the next appointment shows up, Chance, and they see the next appointment show up and I say, oh, the Smiths are here or whatever. And I just even hesitate like, what do you think the buyer thinks at that moment?
Well, the one that sees the other appointment, I think, is going to feel a little bit of urgency, like, hey, I think the water's warm in this community.
Yeah, it's the natural believable urgency. And so usually what happens is that person that's in the seat will sign a contract. And what's awesome about that is when they walk out with a home and you say congratulations and everybody's happy and shaking hands, and the other people that are coming in, it's almost giving them permission to buy, number one, because they saw somebody else do it, and that's natural human behavior.
Yeah.
And the next part is, when we say, thank goodness you got here and they chose something else, I thought they were going to pick the home site that you wanted. And so that would also create that natural, believable urgency with them. And it made that more likely to go forward on a sale. And when you think about, as top producers, as people that have been in this business a while, we know that when you've made a sale in a week, especially on a Saturday morning, Friday morning, whatever it is, you're more likely to have more sales, right? Another sale. So when we get the sales reports, it could be a goose egg. And if it's one and they got it earlier in the week, they're going to have two. All right, let's talk about the next number in the system, 5. And 5 is kind of the magic number as far as shows go. So we have to have so many of those appointments. Now, when we said we had 8 appointments, those were scheduled appointments with time, date, and purpose. It doesn't mean they actually showed. Life does happen. Sometimes people do cancel, right? Or they have to reschedule. So 5 of them showed. And why that number is so important is because it's like the equilibrium of success. If they showed up, that means you did create, a purpose for it. There's enough urgency. There's enough importance for them to show. And if you had like zero shows, then you would know that, hey, I didn't either do something time, date, and purpose. I didn't create urgency. I didn't create obligation. Maybe I tried too hard and they just said yes to say yes. But when you get to that equilibrium of 5, about 62, 65%, you're on the right track. If you're getting 100%, I've had people say, well, 100% of my appointments show. Well, to me, I would say, well, then you're not asking enough for more appointments from other people, because you can't have 100% show. Life is not 100% show. So, all right. So increase the number of shows and your conversion will increase at a higher rate. And the reason's pretty simple. When you have more at bats and you're in your field, when you have appointments, you're always working, Chance. Don't you feel like you're more on your game? Like you're not starting from scratch. You're warm.
Oh,
You're in
there's a
game shape.
mindset there that for sure makes me feel like I'm moving things.
Yeah. And so the more action, the better for us. Less than 5 shows, Chance. It's so amazing when I would look at these sales reports on Sunday night. If I had 4 shows on the sales report in my show column, because that's what I would track on my team, how many appointments, how many shows. I mean, if I saw less than 5, it was almost a guaranteed to be a 0 sales every single time. They just didn't have the number. Now, what I would say is there were some really killer salespeople that were just awesome at all aspects of the deal, whether it's closing, handling objections. Like they were good at numbers, they were good at building value. Theirs might be a 3-1, right? They had 3 shows and they got 1 sale. The average out of thousands and thousands of sales reports is 5. So if you're better than average, then you should expect, 1 from less, but know that the average is about 5 shows to get a sale. Okay, so if the appointment fits in the real category, we have to verify that they showed up. Did these include the key ingredients of urgency and obligation? B-backs don't count. I said that already. It keeps you in game and you in warm and in game shape, and it's kind of the equilibrium of success. All right, so let's get to what we all like.
Hey, and I was going to mention also, Ralph,
Yeah.
that Jackie just said something in the chat that is so true, and that's the takeaway here is if people are ghosting you or not showing, then you didn't create the urgency. You didn't do, there's something there that was missing. And so that's a really good way to increase that show rate for sure.
Well, that you're 100% right. You have to have the ingredients. So, so you have to be real with yourself. If you're using this system to measure yourself, then there's no kidding yourself. Like when you look back and you kind of do an autopsy on whether they showed or not, did they say, hey, I'll be there on 3 o'clock to look at home sites after the soccer game? That's not really, a time, a date, and a purpose. Like there's 2 of the 3, but you really didn't, know exactly what time. I'll be there after the soccer game. Life
Right.
gets in the way. So, and if it didn't have obligation, and then somebody says, hey, well, let's go to the movies or do something else, then if there's no obligation, then you're not going to get show. You're going to get a no-show too. So you're right. There's a lot of reasons. So what we have to do as a sales professional is really break down why that's occurring. All right, let's get to number 1 though. 1 is a sale. We all want a sale per week. That is what this whole system is designed for as far as 851. What Valente does now is 14 appointments, 10 shows, and 2 sales. So we can adjust our results by adjusting our numbers. But this one is simply, increase your numbers of shows and appointments, and you're going to get more sales. You can also, now there's other things that affect this, Chance, and I said those earlier, but closing. If you're not a good if you're not asking for the sale, it's hard to get a sale, right? If you're waiting till they say, what do we do next? Well, then you've probably missed several sales, right? So we can get better at handling objections. Maybe you have an objection like, hey, we have a railroad track, we have power lines, we have, interest rates, the market. If we know there's certain objections that are out there, we should craft some answers. We should get good at those things. There's not a million different ones. I don't think in any community I've had more than like 3 or 4 really objections that were true. All right, and here's the other thing that I think is really important. You need to expect at least 1 sale per week. That's your mental expectations. Like you should be driving to get to that and hold yourself accountable to those results. And it's the average number when you have 8, 5, and 1. And if you don't get a sale with 5 shows, here it goes. Then work on your closing skill sets, working on your conquering concerns or handling your objections or using finance. Here's also what I know. If you're getting 5 shows, Chance,
Mm-hmm.
don't you think those people have an interest? This is not like traffic. These are people that you've made an appointment with time, date, and purpose, and they came back. Don't you think that they can't really say, well, you were overpriced or all these things? They already knew what your price was, right? They already knew that the market was a little different right now. They already knew that interest rates were high. So if you're having 5 shows, don't give yourself the excuse that that's the reason why you're not coming there. You know, that's not the reason why you're having the results that you should have. Now, when you get a sale, you should let the world know. We should be putting it on Facebook, on Instagram. We should be shouting it out to the world. And people buy what, Chance? Can you finish the
They
sentence?
buy where others are buying.
That's it, right? And sales
Yeah,
beget sales. So
that's for
the
sure.
first one's a little harder and the other ones come easier. All right. So I want you to think about a concept. Here's something I did with my teams. I did it with myself. And we would get Monopoly money and we would stuff envelopes. It might be a fun exercise for you to do, but think about this. I did an average one here where a sale was worth 8,000 bucks. Now, whoever's on the phone call, you might have sales that are worth 1,500, 2,000, 5,000, 20,000. Whatever your number that sale is worth is the number you should put where that 8,000 is. So that's what it was around my time when I was selling these higher end homes, and what my commission rate, I was making about 8,000 a sale. And so what I would do is say, hey, if 8,000 is what I got from a sale and I need 5 shows, every time that somebody showed in my door, like they came to my appointment, they showed up, Chance,
Uh-huh.
that show was worth 1,600 bucks. I knew it religiously. Like I could put 1,600 bucks in an envelope, and after the 5 shows that week, I would have a sale. And so you could really, like, it would mentally give me a boost, right? Sometimes we have to kind of trick ourselves to do the work that's hard to do
Yep.
until we know it's true. Like if, it's just like the next one, right? So 1,600 bucks every time somebody showed, man, that would put me in a great frame of mind. Like, hey, I just made 1,600 bucks because I was good enough to get those people to show up to my model. Now, the next one I used in different ways. So the 8 appointments, that's really key too, right? If you don't have appointments and you can't get people to show up. And one of the biggest tricks that I learned was that if when I had a unit of new traffic come in my door, my goal was, first of all, to listen, to help, all those things, to demonstrate value. But at the end of the day, if they didn't buy, my goal was to get an appointment. And so I knew that, hey, if I can get an appointment, and if I get 8 appointments, it equals 8,000. Well, that means each appointment I get is worth $1,000. And so just think of it this way. If you went outside your door after they left and your manager or your owner was sitting there with a stack of cash and you said, hey, I got an appointment with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and they said 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, $1,000 cash. I swear to you, there's not a person on this call that wouldn't get more appointments.
I'd be getting appointments.
You'd be getting appointments,
sure.
right? And
Yep.
the only reason you'd get good appointments because you do all the things you need to do. You'd build the value, you'd tell the story, you'd discover really well. You would build all that. You'd tell about the builders and the features and the community. And if you knew that's what it was, you'd get $1,000. Well, in order to get 1,000 or 8 appointments, it usually took about 32 different conversations, and it's not 32 different people. Remember how the concept of 8 was really 2 or 3 families. The concept of 32 is probably 5, 6, 7, 8 families that you're talking to multiple times per week to try to get them to come to an appointment. And so to me, those are activities that would, every time I had a conversation with a potential prospect, in my mind, I can go, that's worth $250, right? Which made me want to pick up the phone or do that extra text. It made me do all the work that I needed to do which tricked myself. But then all of a sudden, I'd have that envelope of Monopoly money, and guess what? I had 4 sales that month, made $32,000. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So
For
that's
sure.
what I
So
want.
to me, I mean, and I shared this with the team this week, and that is, I called this, let's reverse engineer 851.
Yeah,
Let's go backwards and say, how many meaningful conversations, how many contacts, how many times do we dial? I mean,
right.
it's just, it's a numbers game, and it's the same. When I sold books door to door, how many doors do I need to knock on to get the sell? And it's
That's
the
it.
exact, I love that. It's a great way to look at it. And it's a great way to, as you say, trick your mind to make you do these activities that make you successful.
Yeah, pick up the phone. All right, well, let's go to the next and go into, so how can we use it to manage ourselves? And I just want people to think about this while we go through them, and we'll go a little faster because I know it takes a while and we're going quick, but there's a lot more I want to cover. Let's do this. Let's interpret this sales report, right? So if you turned in a sales report that have 5 appointments and 3 shows, if you showed me that you're only going to have 3 shows that week, couldn't I predict that you'd have a 0 there? So, and here's another predictor. If I only have 5 shows, that's a predictor of my future results. That means my pipeline is not that full, and I have to work on getting my pipeline full because my ratio is actually about 60% show, right? If you double that, I'm pretty
Mhm.
close on the shows, but what's really missing is the amount of appointments. And of course, it leads to no shows. All right, how about this one? Chance, why don't you tell me what you think this means? 10 appointments, 7 shows, 0 sales.
Wow, you got the appointments and you got shows, so you're doing a good job there. But there might be some sales or presentation or closing skills that you need to work on because you didn't get anything out. You didn't get the one sell you needed, or maybe even possibly two with 7 shows there. So,
Well, it's interesting you say that because there's like that's one thing is maybe our skill set. Here's what some people have said in the past. Well, they didn't like the price, or they didn't like this, but why do they show up, Seth? Why do you have 7 shows? Look, they like what you got. There's something missing. Now, the only time it could be maybe not necessarily true is when you start tracking this at the very beginning, Chance, and it's
mhm.
because those people haven't gone through this buying process. So they're working their way through, and probably the next week you're going to have a great week, right? So you had the 10 appointments at your backlog. If we see a pattern of this, then it's we have to say it's on you because they're still showing up, which means they like it enough for you to get there. All right, how about this one? 3, 3, and 1. Well, look, I'll tell you that right now, as a salesperson, as a manager, I'd be happy with 1 sale on that
For
report.
sure. Yep.
And I would be happy that every time I made an appointment, I got a show. So those are the great things. But here's the challenge for me is, and for you as a salesperson is going, well, hey, I better get on the horn. I better do whatever I need to do because my pipeline ain't that full. In fact, that 1 sale could have been like a floor pop that somebody came in on a reload or something and you got lucky. But the odds are that you won't get a sale with only 3 shows. Now, how about this one, Chance? 9, 6, and 2. What do you got?
Let's see. Well, you got your 9 appointments. You got 6 shows, which fits into the show rate,
Yep.
right? And you've got 2 sales. So to me, it sounds like you're tracking ahead a little bit ahead of where you should be. So I would be very happy with the 9, 6, and 2.
Yeah, we all
Am I
should be,
right?
right? You're right. I mean, how it's not. So, see how when you said you make complicated things simple? Look, I just make simple things simple. If I have
Yeah.
enough shows or have enough appointments, they're going to get sales. And when you get a sale, your confidence level goes up, your energy level goes up, your everything goes up. And then you put another sold sign, which is more validation, and you get more sales. So that's what we're all
Right.
shooting for is multiple. So the power of prediction is strong. Like I said, thousands of sales reports, hundreds of salespeople reporting. And if it has an 8 and a 5 in there, you're going to have a 1. And that's the way you predict how you're going to get it. All right. So there's a couple things that involve that are just besides the true numbers and what's behind the numbers, stacking the deck so that the odds are in your favor. And so there's things that you can do, and I'm going to tell you some of them. We went over one earlier where we said we would stack our appointments strategically. Always try to do a slight overlap. Now, I'm not saying overlap by like a half an hour. That's rude, right? But 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, hey, that's okay. But have slight overlap. Even if you only had 2 appointments in a week, they both better see each other. That's the goal, right? It can't seem like a ghost town. All right,
Right.
here's the other thing. We have to, this is really important, one of those things you need to write down. These customers have to come in quick intervals. Okay, quick intervals. Like they got to keep the buying temperature hot. When the buying temperature is hot is when people buy. And so here, I'll ask you, here's a question. So Tuesday, you have an appointment Tuesday, they come Friday, you have an appointment Saturday. What do you think that equals? If you had 3 appointments like that, Chance, in a week, what do you get?
It's a sell. I mean,
Eh,
if they're that engaged, I've got the sell.
You got the sale. All right,
Yeah.
let's do this one that's a little trickier. Okay. Saturday, Saturday, Saturday. Who has the customer the Saturday, Saturday, Saturday? What does that equal, bud?
I that's probably not a sell,
Not a
but you might
sale.
have a really good relationship with someone after 3 Saturdays in a row. Yeah,
Speaking
you
like
might
a
know
true
them well. You
relator.
might know the family. Oh, so you got a friend. Okay.
You got a friend, okay?
All
And,
right.
and so look, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with being friends, but however, you're creating a pattern of not buying. You're creating a pattern. And what I hear salespeople say is, hey, well, they work all week and they can't come out any other time, right? Well, to me, what I would say to you is you haven't made it important enough or urgent enough for them to either come after work or you to stay and do whatever it takes and move that sale forward. You have to do those things. Otherwise, you end up, look, isn't the world volatile enough as it is? Could we have something during the week that scares people, that creates more uncertainty? So think about the more time that goes by, time kills deals, right? And sales. We can stack it in our office, right? So should people buy where people are buying? They want to see that your office is successful. Do you have paper contracts on? Do you have sold signs? Do you have pictures in your office where people are holding up sold? Does it look successful? We can also stack it in our community. So here's a plat map with some sold buttons. I can tell you this was I was hired to fix this community in particular. Now, when I went there the first time, they hadn't had a sale in like 3 months. But the only thing on this board, Chance, was those available signs. There was no sold buttons on it. Now, the reason why they said, well, the house is already there. Well, then why are you showing all those lots that would be out there because they were empty? Well, we
Yeah.
bought sold buttons, we put them on there, and all of a sudden, when people came in the door, they're like, oh my God, look at all those homes that have sold. Even if they had sold a year ago, 6 months ago, it didn't matter. It painted a picture, and people want to buy where it's successful. So instead
Yeah.
of saying, hey, you have all these available, I don't have to make any quick decisions, you can say, wow, there's only a few left. There's a big difference. Now, I'll talk signage in your community. If you are in a new community and you have available, 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 that's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that projects that, you're not very successful, that they have time to wait. The other part is your mind. If you haven't read this book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, you should. It actually talks about how the mind processes things so quick and you don't even realize how and why it processes it. But when you would drive down a street, if you saw all these availables, it would automatically tell your brain, I don't have to make a decision quick, and that's what you'll revert to. Now, if you drive down the same street and you see sold, 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 guess what message it sends your brain?
The water's warm here. I've got to move. I
I
got to do
better I
something
better make a
quick.
decision. So make sure now there's other things to say besides available. Could you say large corner home site? Could you have great incentive right now? Or could you have, like, there's a lot of different things. The other thing is, instead of having availables that are perpendicular to your street, like you see on this format, you can put them parallel. So when they look down a street, they can only see what they turn and look over and see the for sale sign, not like a row of like for sale, for sale, for sale. So we
Makes
have to be
sense for sure.
strategic in what we're doing. Remember, buyers act for three main reasons. They want to improve their life. We've heard this over and over again. That's true. Something is probably not as good as they want, something changed in their life, and they want to improve what their situation is. They feel obligated to. If you've done a good job, people will buy because they feel, wow, I've done it. They've done all this for me. I'm going to buy the house. And fear of loss. Now that was the driver of success during COVID, was fear of loss, because people didn't get to choose the colors. They didn't get to choose the bedrooms, maybe the bathroom, the price, the neighborhood. They had to choose what was available. And that was a fear of loss mentality. So how do we create obligation? Couple things. Obligation is when you do something for somebody else. So you always got to think, I need to create obligation for somebody. What are some of the reasons? I'm going to go quick because we're running out of time. I want to get everything through. Some of the ways we can create obligation for our customers, we can prepare a home site. We can go out there, we can measure where a home's going to be, we can put flags on the lot, and we can say, hey, Chance, you're my buyer. Come out Saturday. We're going to look at home sites. Here's what I'm going to do. You told me you liked a larger, west-facing home site. You wanted all these things. I found our best three, and I'm actually going to go out there and spend a couple hours, and I'm going to put the home where it's going to sit on the home site, so you can actually see where the home would be and what your yard would be like. And what did I just do? I created obligation that you're more likely to show because I put time and effort into you going there to what we're going to do. We can come in before we open. We talked about that. We can say we can have a lender at our model and say, hey, I have a lender coming in so he can work or she can work and help you with the numbers. That's obligation. We can come from another part of town. We can show somebody's house that maybe that plan, they can't visualize it and they can't visualize it without furniture, or maybe there's not one available. We can actually find a customer or prospect. That's a really good one, but you have to make sure they show, right? All right. Urgency has to be a compelling reason. It has to feel like it's important enough to actually change your plans. Some of those are pretty natural, like when we have a price increase. Price increases, we're not seeing a lot of those right now. We're actually seeing the opposite. So we don't typically see that, but we do see incentives and incentives ending, like they're changing an incentive at the end of the quarter or the end of the month. And so we can use those natural guidelines to actually help people nudge over the goal line. So you should be using urgency, stacked appointments, put cones and landscape flags out on the home site. I would do that every once in a while. Chance as a division president, there were some times where I was really desperate. We weren't selling anything, that I would have the lot scraped and I'd put out my form boards and it would look like people are starting to build homes again. And guess what? I'd have people coming in and say, oh my God, there's people buying on my home site. I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, what do you mean? Well,
that's the one I picked out.
Right. It's the one I picked. Well, you haven't come in the model, right? Well, I didn't think I needed to. There was all these availables. Nobody was building anything. So I thought I had plenty of time. So make sure you include urgency. Here's a thought I need you to think about too. When people come in the door, Chance, they give you a Heisman. Why do they give you a Heisman? Why do they kind of push you off and say, hey, it's not that important. When I find the right house, great. We're not in a hurry. Why do they say that?
Well, we haven't built urgency and we haven't asked the right questions to build urgency. So,
yeah,
I always say that we don't, urgency is uncovered by asking questions and having the prospect create that in their own mind, let them internalize that.
Well, we have to make them see why it's important, right? We have to make them see why it's urgent. Like they might miss out on specific home sites. Maybe they miss out on certain incentives. But to me, look, they give you the Heisman because they want to stay away from bad salespeople, ones that are trying to close them before they've really gone through the process. But it's our job. Look, anybody that comes in your model, you have to think they had a spark. There was some reason, something in their life that made them come in the model. Okay. They're going to say all kinds of reasons, decorating ideas, I just was driving by, all these things. The truth is they came in with a spark, and it's your job as a sales professional to try to create urgency and importance. That is what we get paid for, right? And they need it too. All right. So remember, we'll do QA in a second. You need at least 5 shows per week to get that sale. You need 8 appointments, and the more appointments and shows you get, the more sales. Now, one of my favorite people of all time is Zig Ziglar. And when I was an early sales manager, before I really was pushing my 851, I would always say, like I said at the beginning of this, is hey, I want as many sales as possible. The problem with that thought, Chance, was I couldn't ever gauge it. I as many as possible. I like that. in
Yeah.
theory. But what I like better is what Zig Ziglar would say is, hey, don't become a wandering generality. Be a meaningful specific. Measure the activities and the behaviors that create the results that you want to get the results and get your sales, right? Don't just say,
Right.
I'm going to work hard. You have to have certain milestones. You have to measure those metrics. So, all right, now here's what we're going to do. Chance is we are going to, anybody that's attended, we're going to email you a booklet. It's a 16-page booklet that kind of breaks down everything that we talked about today. But let's open it up for Q&A maybe before we lead, or I'll let you kind of take over from here, Chance. And I don't know if there's any questions. I love that everybody's on here. Any
Yeah.
questions? Anything that you want to? Any chat
There,
conversation?
there's I don't have any questions in the Q&A section set. So if y'all have a question, y'all throw it in there. But I kind of was thinking earlier when you were talking about Valente, the 2 month ramp up time. Did you ever kind of figure out what was the reason for that, or was it just, was it mindset, or he had to kind of just stick to
Yeah.
the 851, or what was the reason for that, you think?
Well, first of all, it was hard for him to build up the 8 and 9 and 10 appointments quickly because but what he had to do is go back in that community and try to drum up old business from the cards. And then, he had to build his pipeline with traffic too, to help build that eight appointment, 5 show. But he was doing all the activities. And sometimes the truth is, we can do all the right things and not get the result right away. And that's the hard part for salespeople, for humans in general, is, hey, if we don't see the result in a short period of time, we're almost like an instant gratification type of species, and we have to really know that the right behaviors do. And think about it this way. So if you're doing all this work, and let's say you're top of mind to a lot of people and interest rates drop by half a point or a point,
Hmm.
and you've been doing all this work, don't you think more fish are going to come and bite your hook? Don't you think more people are going to come to your location? And that's why Valente got 6 that next month, and then 6 or more every other month after that. It was because he just kept that merry-go-round going. He kept feeding that appointments, and the numbers started to come out. And then, it's one cycle that it feeds on each other. When he gets 6 sales and he puts up 6 sold signs, what do you think it creates? Urgency for the other people. And so
Yep.
all these things are this great cycle of, hey, do all the work, get the sales. It creates the urgency, makes people act, get the sale. Like, it's one big loop. So to me, once you get the system going, it's like you just got to keep putting the appointments in and keep focusing on those metrics.
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenges that I had as a salesperson was that you see success sometimes, and all of a sudden you're busy meeting people and seeing people, and then what happens? Your 851 starts to kind of drift away because you're not putting in the effort to kind of stay in front of that and make sure that you're getting the 8 appointments and doing the follow up and the prospecting and things like that. So there is, the side of this that where you have to do the work every single day. You schedule the most important appointment that we always say, Ralph, the most important appointment that we have all week is what? The
The one with
appointment
ourselves.
that
Yeah.
we schedule with ourselves to do our prospecting.
Yeah.
So don't let success limit your pipeline in the future because you forget to do some of these things.
Well, and that's why I said you have to look at your sales report and be honest with yourself on your appointments and your shows and your sales, because you're right. When we have success, it's easy for us to say, "Oh, I got to get these through design center. I got to do all these things." Well, I got to do the busy work. And you drop the stuff that you should be doing for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, guess what? You're going to have a lag in sale because your pipeline, now you got to build it up again. So, that is very true. You get complacent because you had the results. That's human nature. And you
Mhm.
got to keep going. So,
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay. Don't have any questions in here yet, but we can wrap it up or we can
yeah,
continue.
what I would say is, Chance, right now, I think more than ever, I would say that the people on here should try to measure their activities. and don't give up. I like to say there was a book, I can't remember who the author was, but it was called 3 Feet from Gold. And I feel that this is a very challenging time. I don't think it's an easy time in our business. So I think what it requires is grit, and it requires you having the ability to make all this effort and not necessarily see things coming back right away. You gotta, like, it's almost like the baseball player that has a 300 average that misses 7 out of 10 times. And that's defeating. But if you let yourself get defeated, then you are exactly what you think, right? Your brain tells you, God, you're not doing something right. You've called 50 people or 20 people and you haven't done. No, you can't let that occur. That's when you lose. So you just got to keep that positive mentality. You got to keep pushing, and that's the hardest part in my opinion. Is you got to have the mindset, and you got to have a strong mind when it's tougher. You just got to say, I'm going to put it to the world. I'm going to do all the effort, the right behaviors. The right behaviors is not like doing paperwork that doesn't generate any activities, especially when you have no sales. The right
Yeah.
activity is doing revenue generating activities like making phone calls, prospecting, emailing, texting, bomb videos. Like, you got to keep going no matter what. You got to keep in game shape. If you're not doing anything and you have a crappy mindset and somebody comes in the door, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to
Yeah.
be ready. You're not going to be in game shape. They're going to say, well, that person looks pretty sluggish. And like you got to do all the things in order to be successful. So that's what I would say
For
is, hey,
sure.
I'm excited about everybody showing up on here. We had a great turnout. And what's good for me is that we have, people on here that I know are going to implement this. They're going to stick with it. And I would love to hear in your future, how it's working for you. There's nobody that I know that's actually worked the system that's came back and said it didn't work.
For sure. And the
And
coaching calls that I've had recently, Ralph, where we
yep,
have gone in and we've done 851 and we come back and we follow up, we make sure they're doing it. The ones that I talk to say it works. And I had those conversations this week. But I've also had coaching calls where I hear something like, "Hey, I've never had to do that before." And
I
it's
know.
pretty amazing. And it's like, we have to do what we have to do to be successful. And like I said at the beginning of this, you got to build your plan and then work your plan. So for sure, and you're right. There's a lot of people on here that have followed us, and we know that they're going to do that. So
Awesome.
Ralph, as always, outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And of course, if there's anything that we can do at Sell Solve Everything to make your sales career smoother, better. If there's something that you need to improve on, definitely reach out, follow us on all the socials. Ralph and I are always posting little tidbits and things to help you be successful in your day-to-day walk
Yeah.
in the model home.
Yeah, and if
For
your
sure.
team, if you're, your sales leader, your coach, your managers, owners, hey, if you think that this could be something that could help your team be more successful, please share it with them and let them know. And we could always do a proposal to come out and see you for a half a day, a full day, schedule, some Zoom calls with you just to keep you in game shape. So anyway, with
For
that, I
sure.
want to sign off and say thank you, Chance. I really appreciate your all your leadership and your coaching, and it makes a difference in the world. So thank you guys. Peace out. Happy
Awesome.
selling.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye bye.